Welcome back to the next part. I hope you're all doing well by God's grace. Let's start the third part of the episode. Don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button and join our YouTube family. The courtroom had fallen into a suffocating silence as the questioning continued. The tension was no longer subtle. It pressed against every wall, every breath, every heartbeat in the room. "She needed me more," he had said earlier. But now the follow-up came sharp and unforgiving, and Christine's children didn't need you? Janelle's didn't. There was no answer. The next question cut even deeper. Did you inform Meri that you no longer considered her your wife years before she left? A pause. Then quietly, yes. And yet, the attorney continued, voice steady but piercing, you continued accepting her financial contributions to the family? His eyes dropped. Yes. The silence that followed was heavy, like something had just cracked open in the center of the room. Judge Mendes finally raised his hand, stopping everything. His voice, calm but commanding, cut through the stillness. That's enough for now. Everyone froze. Mr. Brown, the judge continued slowly, leaning forward. This court does not rule on moral beliefs, but it does rule on patterns. And what I am seeing is a consistent pattern of emotional favoritism, financial misdirection, and lack of transparency. The words landed like blows. Your spiritual framework may explain your structure, he added, but it does not excuse legal imbalance. Do I make myself clear? Kody nodded, but something inside him had already shifted. He knew it. The tide had turned. Then came another question, equally devastating. Did you consult all wives before selling jointly owned property? His voice was smaller now. Not always. Christine's hands tightened in her lap. And then, the moment no one expected. The doors opened. The courtroom shifted as a presence entered, calm, steady, undeniable. Leon Brown. A ripple moved through the gallery. Gasps. Whispers. Shock. Kody looked up, completely unprepared. This was the one name he hadn't anticipated. The one voice he wasn't ready to face. Leon walked forward with quiet strength, measured steps, composed posture, unreadable expression. Dressed simply, but carrying a presence that commanded attention without demanding it. They passed Kody without a glance. That silence said more than words ever could. After being sworn in, Leon spoke clearly. My name is Leon Brown. I am Kody Brown's child. I was raised in this family, the one the world watched. The courtroom leaned in. When asked to describe their upbringing, Leon paused, choosing each word carefully. It was big, loud, sometimes happy, but also fractured. They explained how each household felt like a separate world for homes, for realities. And my father? Leon said, glancing briefly toward Kody. He tried to belong to all, but he only truly lived in one. A pause. Robyn's. Kody flinched. I didn't understand everything as a child, Leon continued, but I understood favoritism. You don't need words to feel it. Then came the deeper truth. My mother tried harder than anyone, Leon said, voice tightening slightly. She waited for love, for attention, for partnership. And it never came back. The courtroom sat motionless. Did decisions get made without her? The attorney asked. Leon gave a faint, sad smile. Always. They recalled moments, like learning about major life changes after the fact. I remember her crying in the kitchen because she found out we were moving after it had already been decided. Gasps filled the room. Then came the turning point. You blamed her, Leon said, looking directly at Kody. But you left first. There was nowhere to hide now. When asked about their relationship with their father, Leon didn't hesitate. I tried, they said. I really did. But love in that house came with conditions. A pause. If you disagreed, you were disloyal. If you spoke up, you were difficult. The room tightened again. And when I came out, Leon continued, voice steady but heavy, he said he needed time. Another pause. That was years ago. I'm still waiting. Christine covered her mouth. Tears welled in Meri's eyes. This was no longer just a courtroom case. This was something deeper. I watched my mother shrink, Leon continued. I watched Christine disappear. I watched Janelle carry everything alone. Their voice hardened. And I watched one household treated like royalty, while the others were expected to accept scraps. The judge leaned forward. In your opinion, was the family structure fair? Leon didn't hesitate. No. It was one king, and the rest of us lived in his kingdom. Even the court reporter stopped typing. Why testify today? Came the final question. Leon looked at each of the women. Because they deserve justice. Because I saw what happened behind closed doors. Because the truth matters, even when it hurts. By the time Leon stepped down, something fundamental had shifted. The illusion was gone. Then came the financial evidence. Spreadsheets lit up the courtroom screen, years of transactions, contributions, property records. And one detail stood out like a spotlight. Janelle, 0% Christine, 0% Meri, 0% Robyn and Kody, 100%. A murmur spread like wildfire. The attorney's voice was sharp. This is not mismanagement. This is a pattern. A calculated pattern. Funds from multiple women, redirected to one household. Promises of shared ownership, quietly erased. Then Christine stood. She walked to the center of the room, the same place where everything had unraveled. I believed in the dream, she said softly. I believed in him. Her voice trembled, but didn't break. I gave him everything: my youth, my time, my body, my children. A breath. And I walked away with nothing. The words echoed. If this wasn't about control, she continued, then why were we told we were equals, while documents were signed behind our backs? Silence. I'm not angry anymore, she said. I just want the truth to matter. When the judge finally spoke again, his voice carried weight. This court may not govern spiritual unions, he said, but it does govern financial harm. He looked directly at Kody. What I see is not just imbalance. It is systematic exclusion. After deliberation, the ruling came. Christine, financial restitution and equity share. Janelle, co-ownership and repayment. Meri, reimbursement and access to financial records. And Kody, full financial disclosure. Mandatory mediation. A looming asset freeze. It wasn't just a ruling. It was accountability. Outside the courthouse, the world exploded. Media coverage, headlines, public reaction. But inside, something quieter had happened. Something final. Christine stood in the sunlight later that evening, feeling something unfamiliar. Freedom. For the first time in decades, she didn't have to wait. Janelle returned home and went straight to her garden, not to paperwork, not to victory speeches. To the earth. Because she wasn't the helper anymore. She was the owner. Meri sat before her reflection that night. And for the first time in years, she saw herself. Not through someone else's lens, but her own. And Leon? They sat beside her, scrolling through messages of support. People see you now, they said softly. Meri didn't respond. She didn't need to. Because finally, she saw herself too. The night after the ruling did not bring celebration. It brought quiet, deep, unfamiliar quiet that settled into every corner of the lives that had just been changed forever. Inside his home, Kody sat alone at the kitchen table. The papers from the court remained exactly where he had left them. He hadn't touched them. Hadn't needed to. Every word was already burned into his mind. For years, he had been the center of the story. The voice. The narrator. The man who explained everything to his family, to the cameras, to the world. Now, there was no narration left. Only truth. The silence in the house felt different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was empty. Not the kind of emptiness that comes from a quiet evening, but the kind that comes when something irreversible has been stripped away. He leaned back in his chair, staring at nothing. For the first time in decades, there was no one waiting for him in another room. No rotation of households. No sense of being needed in multiple places at once. Just one house. One life. And the weight of everything he hadn't seen, or refused to. Across state lines, Christine woke early the next morning. The sunlight filtered softly through her window, warm and steady. For a moment, she simply lay there, staring at the ceiling, letting the stillness settle into her bones. No anxiety. No waiting. No anticipation of someone else's approval. Just peace. She sat up slowly and walked to the kitchen, pouring herself a cup of coffee. The simple act felt different now, intentional, grounded. Her phone buzzed repeatedly on the counter. Messages. Interviews. Requests. Headlines. She didn't pick it up. Not yet. Instead, she stepped outside onto the porch and sat down, wrapping her hands around the mug. The air was cool, the world quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called out, breaking the silence gently. For years, her life had been filled with noise, emotional noise, expectations, compromises. Now, the quiet didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. Janelle's morning looked different, but no less meaningful. She was already outside, sleeves rolled up, hands in the soil. The garden didn't care about court rulings or media attention. It demanded presence, effort, patience. And that's exactly what she gave it. Each movement, pulling weeds, adjusting soil, watering the roots, felt grounding. Real. Honest. For so long, she had built things for others. Managed. Supported. Sustained. Now, she was building something for herself. She paused for a moment, straightening up and looking across her yard. It wasn't grand. It wasn't flashy. But it was hers. Completely hers. And that realization settled deep in her chest, not as excitement, but as something stronger. Certainty. Meri's morning came slower. She stood in front of her mirror again, just like the night before. But this time, there was less hesitation in her gaze. She reached for a brush, running it slowly through her hair, watching her reflection carefully. There was a time when she would have wondered how she appeared to him. Whether she was enough. Whether she was seen. That question didn't exist anymore. Leon walked past the doorway, pausing briefly. "You okay?" they asked gently. Meri met their eyes through the mirror. Then, for the first time in a long time, she gave a small, but genuine smile. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I think I am." Leon nodded, not pushing further. They didn't need to. Some answers didn't need explanation. By midday, the world outside had caught up. News outlets replayed courtroom clips. Analysts debated the outcome. Social media continued to erupt with opinions, support, criticism, and reflection. But inside the lives of those who had lived it, things were slower, more personal, more real. Later that afternoon, Christine, Janelle, and Meri found themselves together again, this time not in a courtroom, but in a quiet living room. No lawyers, no judge, no audience, just them. For a while, no one spoke. There was nothing left to argue, nothing left to prove. Finally, Janelle exhaled softly. "It's weird," she said. "After all that, it's just over." Christine nodded. "Yeah, I kept thinking there'd be some big moment. Some feeling." "And?" Meri asked. Christine thought for a second, then shook her head slightly. "There isn't," she admitted. "It's just calm." Meri looked down at her hands, then back up. "I think that's what we were fighting for the whole time," she said. "Not revenge. Not validation. Just calm." As the sun began to set, they sat together in that shared understanding, three women who had once been bound by a complicated system, now connected by something simpler. Truth. Growth. And finally, choice. That evening, Kody stepped outside his house for the first time all day. The sky was painted in deep orange and fading blue. The world moved on, unchanged by what had just happened inside a courtroom miles away. He stood there for a long moment, hands at his sides. For years, he had believed he was holding everything together. Now he understood something he hadn't before. You can't hold something together if you were never truly holding it right. The realization didn't come with anger, or even regret. It came with something quieter. Acceptance. And as the last light of the day disappeared beyond the horizon, one truth settled across all their lives. The story hadn't ended in that courtroom. It had only just begun. Because for the first time, every single one of them was no longer living the same story. They were finally writing their own. The days that followed didn't explode with drama the way the trial had. There were no raised voices, no shocking revelations, no courtroom gasps. Instead, life unfolded in a quieter, steadier rhythm, one that felt unfamiliar to all of them. But quiet didn't mean easy. Kody found himself waking earlier than usual, not because he had somewhere to be, but because sleep no longer held him the same way. His mind refused to rest. Every conversation from the courtroom replayed on a loop: Leon's voice, Christine's words, the judge's tone. He walked through the house slowly, almost like a stranger. The walls, once filled with noise and movement, now echoed faintly with absence. For years, he had moved from house to house, always in motion, always needed somewhere. Now, there was nowhere else to go. He stopped in the living room and looked around. Everything was intact. Furniture in place. Photos on the walls. But something essential was gone. Not taken, lost. And for the first time, he didn't try to justify it. Christine, on the other hand, was learning how to fill her days differently. Not with obligation, but with intention. That morning, she found herself driving with no particular destination. No schedule. No one expecting her back at a certain time. The freedom felt almost disorienting. She rolled the windows down, letting the air rush in, and for a moment, she laughed softly to herself. It wasn't a loud laugh. Not performative. Just a quiet release of something that had been held in for years. She pulled over near an open stretch of land, stepping out and taking in the view. Vast, open, endless. For so long, her world had felt small, contained within expectations, roles, limitations. Now, it stretched out in front of her. Unwritten. Janelle's shift was more practical, but just as powerful. She sat at her table surrounded by documents, but this time the feeling was different. These weren't records of what she had lost. They were proof of what she had built. She reviewed the property details carefully, her mind sharp, focused. For years, she had contributed quietly, efficiently, without recognition. Now, the recognition didn't just come from the court. It came from herself. She reached for a pen and made a note in the margin: plans, ideas, next steps. Ownership wasn't just legal. It was mental. And she was stepping fully into it. Meri's transformation was the most internal. She wasn't rushing into plans or decisions. She wasn't seeking movement. She was sitting with stillness. That afternoon, she walked into a small boutique store, one she had passed many times before but never entered. Inside, everything felt different. Colors, textures, possibilities. She moved slowly through the space, touching fabrics, pausing at mirrors, considering not what someone else might think, but what she felt. She picked out something simple, elegant, entirely her choice. At the counter, as she paid, the cashier smiled politely. "Special occasion?" she asked. Meri paused, then shook her head gently. "No," she said. "Just me." And somehow, that answer carried more meaning than anything else. Meanwhile, Leon sat with their phone in hand, watching the world react. Clips of their testimony were everywhere. Headlines, comments, messages from strangers. Some supportive, some critical, some deeply personal. They scrolled for a while, then stopped. Because for all the noise outside, what mattered most had already happened inside that courtroom. The truth had been spoken. Not perfectly, not without pain, but honestly. They locked their phone and set it aside, leaning back in their chair. For years, their voice had felt conditional, filtered through expectations, family dynamics, fear of conflict. Now it was their own. And that realization brought something unexpected. Not relief, but grounding. A few days later, something small, but significant, happened. Christine invited Janelle and Meri over. No agenda. No discussion of the case. Just dinner. At first, it felt unfamiliar. The three of them, sitting at a table without the structure that had once defined their relationship. No hierarchy. No roles assigned. No unspoken tensions lingering beneath the surface. Just three women, figuring out what came next. The conversation started light, simple things, everyday topics. But slowly, naturally, it shifted. "Do you ever think about who you were before all this?" Christine asked quietly. Janelle leaned back slightly, considering. "I think I was always me," she said. "I just didn't realize I was allowed to be." Meri nodded slowly. I don't even know if I remember that version of myself. Christine looked between them. Maybe that's the point, she said. Maybe we don't go back. A pause. Maybe we figure out who we are now. The idea settled over the table, not heavy, not overwhelming. Just possible. That night, as they stepped outside after dinner, the air felt different. Lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because something had finally been released. Back at his house, Kody sat in the dim light of the living room, a single lamp casting long shadows across the floor. He had spent the evening going through old photos, ones he hadn't looked at in years. There they were. Moments that once felt whole. Smiles that once felt real. And maybe they had been. But somewhere along the way, reality had drifted from the image. He held one photo a little longer than the others. All of them together. Before the fractures were visible. Before the distance had taken shape. He exhaled slowly, setting it down. You can't go back, he realized. Not because time doesn't allow it, but because truth doesn't. And as the night stretched on, one thing became clearer for all of them. The courtroom had given them an ending. But life was asking a different question now. Not what happened, but what do you do next? The third part is over. Thanks for watching. Please like this video and subscribe the channel. Thanks for your support.